I'm sorry that we have so much little time, because I think we have to. We should respect the timetable. We can go on a bit more than 5, of course, but not much longer, because there will be other programs already you have. But I would like to continue on the theme that we had among the presenters, and since we had 2 German speakers, I would like to ask them about Vergangenheitsbewältigung, because this is something which is very much respected outside Germany, but I also know that it is somehow contested also in Germany, and that it has not been an easy process. So, could you articulate on what you see as the lessons learned from Vergangenheitsbewältigung, and how would you present it as an example to others as well? Because I think that there is a lot of countries in the world, including my own country, Finland, which will benefit from an open and honest disclosure and look into its own history and dismantling old historical myths. And I must say that I was impressed by, when I was coming here, I noticed at the Friedrichstrasse station there was a memorial erected to those who left the station by train in 1939 to 1948. Some of them went on to their deaths, and others went on to live longer lives. And I think that was a very important reminder in the city structure of what is going on and what history entails. And if you go to the Friedrichstrasse station, it is outside the streets, this statue, and I think it's a wonderful reminder of the history that you have to face in your own country as well. But it also is important, by the way, for those who are coming to Germany, increasing numbers from other countries to know what the German history is that one. But I would like our German colleagues to comment on this aspect to begin with.
So 2 questions, thank you very much. First, a question about the current situation and the downfall of how democracies dies, as a famous book title is. So I think it's a problem that right now that there's seldom something like a coup d'etat where tanks are on the street and suddenly a democracy cracks down, like in Chile 73. And then the world views the whole thing, and then suddenly there are sanctions and protest groups are coming up and protest against the new dictator who killed the Democrats. What we now have is what is called mixed systems, authoritarian democracies, where we have step by step a slow kind of way to dictatorships, but you never know what happens. Sometimes it changes to a different direction, like in Hungary, but sometimes we don't know what's happening in Hungary. Right now there are some signs there will be new conflicts with the EU. And this is a problem for protest, because protest needs a key figure, a key like Darth Vader in Star Wars or whatever, a person who is clearly the evil part, who's changing everything, and then people are mobilized. And this is, people get used to by step to the downfall of democracies, and that's how the politics of Putin in Russia and so on was tolerated for such a long time. So the war in Ukraine was needed that people wake up and see what is happening in Russia. So I would agree that we should focus on those countries, and you have to start early with sanctions, not when it's too late. So because once a dictator is in power, there's a kind of no return for Putin right now. But if you start with sanctions a bit earlier, they might correct their path. Concerning your question, the Vergangenheitsbewältigung, so I would argue in a different way. On the first, if you look to history, what I showed, so the early years of the Federal Republic, this Vergangenheitsbewältigung was not really strong. And this had consequences for foreign policy. So human rights were not so important if they didn't fit to the ideology. So human rights did matter in communism, but not in right-wing dictatorships. And this changed. And then the Vergangenheitsbewältigung after the big Eichmann trials in the 60s and Auschwitz trial had an influence on foreign policy because people in foreign policy argued these countries like Chile have to help the Jews, and now we have to help people in these dictatorships in this way around. Lessons learned. I think Germany is still learning lessons concerning especially the colonial past. So if we look right now, the big changes in dealing with the German colonial history, I just spoke with a student from Cameroon here about this. It's this lesson, they are still learning the lesson, how to deal with Namibia, Tanzania, with Cameroon, Togo, and how to return and how to compensate and how to deal with this past. So I think this is still in the making, and Germany is not the model. So France is ahead in this topic, for instance.
Well, Hartmut.
Yeah, I'm okay, try it this way. I mean, in the field of the economy, I mean, I talked a little bit about the AfD, and it's really shocking for me to see how much they have forgotten about history, about the historical experience, the foundations of the prosperity, open markets, immigration. These are all factors that were very important, but completely forgotten. I mean, they are now painted as a dark and negative force. So while we are making progress in some areas, maybe dealing with the colonial past, there is a process of forgetting the past and of sort of reframing it for political purposes. Because I mean, these recipes this party is propagating, I mean, they are really very old. I mean, they go back to to fascism, and they have. I mean, they are a recipe for absolute disaster. But many people don't realize that. They think, oh, it's a good idea. Let's keep the foreigners out, and we can do it by ourselves. And so this is quite a shocking for me. This is quite a shocking experience.
Birgit, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I would. Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm going to talk about that. Is this functional? I think I'm going to talk about, well, I will talk about that tomorrow. I think that the German, we were German kind of remembrance culture. We were really masters of remembrance. World leaders, if you like. And I think we've run into a crisis, and we have to really think now. And I'll talk about that tomorrow more.
Okay. And Yossi, do you have any views on German Vergangenheitsbewältigung?
Well, speaking about Germany, for us in Israel, it was always a difficult subject. What are you doing with yourself after the Holocaust? So, my family did not come from the Holocaust. I mean, they emigrated to Israel more than 100 years ago. Of course, families, people in the family, but not direct relations, were killed in the Holocaust. But the attitude of those who were not personally hurt by it was very different among different people. For example, my father never bought anything made in Germany. This was his revenge. He did not buy. I remember once on Friday he bought a mixer and came home, opened the box and saw that it was made in Germany. He ran like fire back to the shop and exchanged it for a French-made mixer. He knew German and never spoke in German. He never visited Germany until he died. Never. Did it help? Did it do something to the world? Did he threaten the next generation in Germany? Did he prevent, God forbid, another Holocaust? No. And actually, the attitude of Israel toward Germany, I believe, was changed already. I mean, after the reparations in the 50s, when Israel, in a way, was saved by German money, and it was very difficult to ignore it. And Germany went out of its way. It was very important for Germany vis-a-vis the Americans and others to be nice to Israelis. Now, Germany did something very, very simple. It invited young people to Germany, like young Israelis who came on the account of the German government to meet with their colleagues from Germany to talk, sometimes very tough talks, and to see Germany, the other Germany, the new Germany, the non-Nazi Germany. And the mere fact that, in the 60s, in the 70s, we were invited to Germany. My first visit abroad was to Germany, because we were invited by groups to Germany to talk to our colleagues there. And it was fascinating. We saw people who were very normal people, and who were very critical on Israel already then, and about our attitude to the Palestinians, about occupation, all these things. But on the other hand, for us, they became our best friends. So, for example, I just give you one example, and this will be enough. They became ministers and even a chancellor. I mean, our counterparts. And when Helmut, the chancellor in the 20 years ago. No.
Helmut Schmidt, Helmut Kohl.
Schroeder.
20.
Schroeder was the head of the young guard of the German Socialist Party. I remember he invited me to Aschaffenburg 100 years ago to talk with the people there. When he became a chancellor, it was the most obvious thing that I, as a minister in Israel, hosted him, or Heide Marie Wiczorek, or others, people who became ministers and very important people. So it so happened that for my generation, the best friend abroad were Germans, and remained Germans. And when my children grew up, they were invited to Germany, and they lived for 2 weeks in a home of a German kid in their own age, in the same kind of system. So what I can say is that for us, the attitude to Germany is a very, very interesting one, because we are close to Germany, and on the other hand, we could never forgive. And this mixture, in my view, is positive.
May I ask the younger generation, is history important for you in the age of social media? Because here we are in the age where people are meeting and going somewhere. But if anyone want to comment of the students, would you think that historical arguments, historical experience is in those topics you're interested in important, and even if you argue it's not important, it's fine. So just to have a debate with you.
Please. Is that a microphone?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandeep. I'm a master's student here at the ICD. I come from India. It's interesting to me that, and this is specifically addressed to Erkki, I really like to address, and the fact that you made mention to Vergangenheitsbewältigung. It's very important, and I agree with you that Germany presents, I think, the most spectacular example of this Erinnerungskultur, the culture of wanting to remember what happened in the past and to not bury it and to walk past it as if it never happened. I think that's praiseworthy, admirable, all of that said and done. I do think, and some other critics have also been increasingly complaining, that Vergangenheitsbewältigung is fast turning into Vergangenheitsüberkompensierung. You may agree or you may disagree, but I thought it was important to mention that in the age of social media, the narratives about what happened in the Second World War and what happened to the Jews is terrible by all means, and there is no going around it or glossing over it. However, a lot has happened since then. And even if Germany wants to keep the culture of Erinnerung alive, there might be some re-evaluation needed given the context of recent history in mind. And I think a far more humane approach to Palestine than it currently does. It's a very controversial opinion, I know, to say aloud in Germany, and even then I took the liberty because this is an academic space and I think there should be differing opinions given space. So I would appreciate if Erkki and Professor Bösch were to address it, but of course I would really appreciate if the others in the panel would also.
Yeah. But maybe we should collect other voices too, so there's another one.
Thank you. My name is Lucia. I'm an intern here, but I study international relations. And answering your question about social media and history, I do think that it's so important that people in our generation learn about history, learn about what happened, because social media nowadays, it influences people's minds quite a lot. And I mean, in Spain at least, I know this, that social media is polarizing the young generations. It's making us believe things in a very extreme way, and it's also not allowing there to be enough space to have open discussions. So people are going to very, very different extremes, and people don't want to listen to other opinions. People don't want to have discussions or debates, which are very healthy generally and help with cooperation and help with peacekeeping. And I think that social media is fracturing history and, you know, the peace. But yes, that's my opinion. Thank you.
Would you like to respond?
Yes, so concerning Vergangenheitsbewältigung and social media, so from a German view, I can say history is becoming much more important here. So there are many young historians who are really successful on TikTok and Instagram, who have got something like millions of followers or views at least. We are, as academics, we are also now starting with TikTok, although it was always seen like for the very young generation. So it's seldom me self-presenting, but of course younger students and so on presenting content. So I think it's important to deal even on TikTok with the Holocaust and with very difficult topics here, or colonial history. So I would agree, and I believe that still the old mass media are important. So like when we are in the news and TV, it's still, you get something like in Germany something like 4 or 5 million viewers, and you need a lot of effort to have 5 million viewers in the social media if you're not a superstar there. So you have to combine it here if you deal with and sometimes these videos are of course going to Insta and so on then later on. Concerning the Vergangenheitsüberkompensierung, so what it is a compensation which is too much about the past, maybe to translate this long word for those who do not understand the German word. Yes, it's difficult, and we just in the coffee break we discussed about Israel and Palestine too, and I think we shouldn't say that you're not allowed to discuss such a difficult conflict in the public. I think this is not true in Germany. It's discussed everywhere and in every kind of classes and so on. And I think it works not to, at least in some social media, it's very difficult, I know this, but usually for me at university it works quite well to discuss these questions, and you should be really open to make your argument in a polite way, whoever is discussing it. I think this is the solution, to make discussion which are organized, to write, we just discussed writing papers and to find a consensus how to deal with the difficult German past in this content. And the relationship to Israel, and that's what is demanding for us as academics too, to find a balance here. I can only say this, and if it's Überkompensierung, well, in some cases it's not like that. I just mentioned the post-colonial debates where Germany is a latecomer, where Germany is not doing that much now, symbolic actions. But not too much compensation. They're quite slow in giving back art and so on. Yeah.
So I think all the questions actually link us to the very challenge for the young people, namely that history is not read as it should be read. And I think we as historians experienced these lessons of the history in the library. So in the library, in the archives. And I think you and we should react to this challenge from the media with the answers from the libraries. So we have the libraries, we should read, we should search for answers in the libraries. And you in Germany have a lot of opportunities in this sense. I can confess from my experience, I have been a student in Germany where I started with a scholarship from Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and I learned a lot. So I accomplished my PhD in Göttingen in Oriental Studies, so starting with Syriac, Aramaic, and many other languages. So, and I can now say that you should valorize such experiences, because you have all the opportunities here in Germany in terms of accessing history, accessing resources that can tell you the truth, not the media. The media is not the source that you should take the information from. So in this sense, I think we should come back to what has happened in the history with Entmythologisierung. There have been a lot of debates also in Germany, Marburg, focused on specific moments, and now we should do also this Entmythologisierung, this demythologizing the history in the public space. And we have a real chance now, and the challenge is growing up to react and to give answers to the young generation.
I think our time is close to what the Birgit is.
Yeah, did you say overcompensation? Yeah, I would not say overcompensation also. I would, no?
Okay.
But what I'm thinking, as I said, I wanted to talk about that at length tomorrow. It's a kind more of a self-centeredness, a German self-centeredness that for us has worked for a long time. But now that we are living in a much more globalized world, we have to explain it to the others. At least we have to do that. And I think that politics and the media have not done that, right? And so they have kind of contributed also to this extreme polarization that, of course, we have. No? We can create spaces at universities. I do that too all the time. But of course, there is a high polarization out in the streets and everywhere, and we need to get away from that. And that also means that we need to explain to people who come to us and don't know sort of our feelings about that and what it means for us, right? And then we can talk. And that I think that has been missing, and that's a problem.
So, there is a question, please.
Another
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm called Jervis. I just want to make an observation and also contribute to what my colleague said earlier. I believe the social media has kind of opened the eyes of a lot of, let me say, those from the South concerning a lot of events going on around the world. For example, we speak about leaders like Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yeah, a bit closer, yeah.
Yeah, Napoleon Bonaparte. When we speak about him, we see him as a hero. But meanwhile, he was a warmonger, and he had also killed a lot of people. When we look at King Leopold II of Belgium, we also look at him as a kind of national hero. We speak about him. Meanwhile, he killed more than 10 million Congolese. But when we speak about Hitler, so many things does change. And I believe to a greater extent the narratives of the Second World War, my personal opinion, about Germany is not really just. There's a lot of pressure on the German citizens, and which is not of their making, those who are living now, because that's the narratives that the British are also advancing, why they cannot apologize to the Africans for enslaving the Africans, that they were not the ones who killed the Africans, so they cannot ask for forgiveness. So why is it that there's so much pressure on Germany? Is it just because some particular group of people were killed? In the Second World War, a lot of people were killed, not just one set of people. So why is it that all the narrative about the Second World War is about a particular ethnic group, and not generalizing other people who lost their lives, and so on and so forth? And I think the leader of Germany back then was not, I will not say he was an imbecile, as most historians will paint him. Maybe he had the reason for wars, not just killing a particular group, I'm saying the war in general. Something might have gone wrong that we or the historians haven't told us what actually pushed the Second World War. The narrative is all about against Germany, for example. So maybe it's time for the historians to actually tell us what actually went wrong. I knew my basic history, there were issues about Poland, even the present-day Palestine, and England was pushing certain narratives against Germany, and the leader back then also retaliated somehow. So when we speak about history, let us be open and tell people exactly what's going on. And also in the West, there is the issue with democracy, and there's another arm of democracy that is very dangerous, which is the issue of cancellation. And what I've said today, if a professor in the West should actually tell the people exactly what went wrong during the Second World War, maybe that professor will be stripped of his professorship because they don't want people to know. And that is not democratic. And this issue about cancellation has been going on around the world. When you criticize a particular action of the West, you are being cancelled. If you are against the West, you are being considered as a dictator. Meanwhile, maybe you are trying to, help your people in the right way. For example, in Burkina Faso, it's already is already termed a dictator because it's against the French. And another aspect of the issues about the EU that I think they should look into is about France and their continual engagement in Africa. For example, most of French colonies in Africa are using the France CFA, which is, I don't see any right that is above the right of self-determination. The human rights without self-determination is no right. So let the African people be able to like find their path in politics and finding a system that is good for them and not being dictated upon by the West, because actually a lot of things are not working in Africa. And there are forces that are keeping certain governments in place, which are kind of autocratic governments. And I think these are issues that the EU should also look into. Thank you.
So, why is the pressure so high on Germany? Was your question one part of the question and the reason for the Second World War? I mean, I can't go now in 5 minutes into the history of all the reasons of the Second World War, but to make it more general, racism, anti-Semitism, were major and stereotypes against Polish people, against Russian people. These were main reasons for the World War, and that not only like a man like Hitler was elected, that people followed him, that people went to the war and supported the war, and so the general point for me would be to fight such racism, stereotypes, anti-Semitism, prejudices in general. But of course, if you are you have to know history to deal with stereotypes coming up with all those right-wing parties now who are successful in everywhere in Europe and beyond Europe. So I think it's important to look for this history everywhere in the world, not only, of course, in Germany. And coming to Africa, I mean, it's important, and I spoke already about colonialism and post-colonial guilt, but it's most African countries have their independency for 60 years now, and they have their own history already. I mean, this means that also African history, also African states have to deal with the problematic sides of their own history since they are independent. So this is an important field too, and discuss racism, prejudices, and so on against the West, but also in Africa, but also the racism outside Africa against Africa. So it's really complicated. That's what I wanted to say, and we have to see all sides and bring historians here together in these difficult questions. So maybe a bit general answer, but to keep it short.
I should mention that about colonial history, that Historians Without Borders had arranged actually a seminar in South Africa, Johannesburg, where we had African historians and historians from former colonial powers, and discussing how to write colonial history. Namely, and I think we have also the ambition, if we find the funding for it and the conditions for it, to start a larger project bringing together historians from both former colonies and former colonial powers on how to write colonial history, because it has been done so far mainly without very little or if any interaction between the two. And I think that this is coming actually a more urgent problem today when we are discussing how colonial history is taught in European schools. You cannot do it in the same way you did 50 years ago, because a growing part of the students and pupils are coming from former colonies themselves and who have totally different backgrounds and totally different family reasons and knowledge about what the colonial history is. So that is a real challenge for us, how we are going to do this in the future. Historians Without Borders actually has tried to apply for funding from the European Commission for this project, chartering how to teach colonial history. We have not yet been successful, but we got a positive response, so we will try again. And we would invite all of course, both history teachers and historians to join in such a project.
more questions or comments?
Hmm?
Okay. You can introduce yourself as well.
So yeah, my name is Alan, and I'm also from India. So, I'd like to ask two questions, both addressed to Dr. Yossi. And yeah, I'd like to start off by saying that so the people who are working at such a high level, people like you, honestly have a lot of respect, since you guys also give your best. There's a lot of criticism for every politician and everyone who is out there working hard. So with with utmost respect, I would like to ask you just two questions. I'd like to be very specific on these things. So my first question is regarding current affairs. We've been hearing about certain advancements, like Israel's advancements into southern Lebanon, and so I mean the whole story of Israel. To be honest, it's inspirational. There's nothing away from that. But just asking about the advancements and things like that. Also, I'm from India, and this interests me further because we face a common enemy which is called terrorism, and just want to ask you about how India's stand should be to counter terrorism also when it comes to the whole illegally occupied regions in India, and also the first question and also the second question, if you could answer.
This one's better.
Okay. Now, if you ask me about Lebanon, it is a typical case in which we don't learn from history anything. Typical, because we were there. We knew that it was idiotic to remain there for years and years, until people like myself who went to the streets and shouted, enough. Our soldiers were killed there. We did not get any security for the northern part of Israel. And when we left the belt in Lebanon, there was total silence for a while, not forever, because it was not followed by a peace treaty or by efforts like that. And if such steps are not followed by diplomacy, then the effect of war or your stay there is evaporating. And I think that it is a universal issue. And I can tell you something about India and Pakistan. I have some minutes? Okay. It will resemble my story about that I told before about North Caledonia, North Macedonia. I went to an official visit to India, and I was asked my team to prepare for me the talking points, and then they said there is a point that will be raised by the foreign minister and others. What is the view of Israel about the Shimla Agreement of '72? I did not know exactly the details of a Shimla Agreement of '72, so I asked to read it, and I read it. The first impression was not bad. I mean, it was an agreement. It ended the war between India and Pakistan. So who am I to oppose it, or criticize it? Sure enough, the next day I'm in India. I landed in Mumbai already, and I saw from the window of the airplane a big group of reporters, TV anchormen, and it was really unbelievable. So I asked, whom are they waiting for? They said for you. I said, why? I mean, I thought that they would ask me about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and how can we solve it and whatever, or why don't we make peace after so many, or whatever. So I'm going down, and they immediately surrounded me, and they asked me what is the official view of Israel about the Shimla Agreement of 72. I was well prepared to say we support it. Immediately after that, they folded all the cameras and whatever. They didn't have time to ask any other question, and they left me. Next day, it was the headlines in the papers that I saw. Okay, later on, when I got into the details of the Shimla Agreement, it convinced me that actually it was an agreement between the superpower, India, and Pakistan, which allowed India to continue and rule the areas which were conquered. Of course, exchange of prisoners, I mean, this was the main point then, and that was done. But since then, India sticks to the Shimla Agreement because it allows it to keep the status quo. This is the story. And in a way, if I may say so, Israel learned from it. I mean, we have the 242 UN resolution. We are very happy with it. Why we are so happy with it? Because it says that when there is peace, there should be a total withdrawal of Israel. But there is no peace. So there is no withdrawal, and we are building settlements, and we are very happy people. In brackets. So, I mean, the stronger power will always support the status quo because it works for itself. And we should, and again, this is a universal lesson. We should understand it. And I mean, had I been aware of it enough, I wouldn't have said, yes, we support it, as if big deal. I would say that we are very happy that an agreement was signed by both sides, but it should bring about a real solution for the problem and not just keep the situation and freeze it. So again, speaking about India, speaking about other issues, we can easily learn from each other because on the face of it, every conflict is different than the other, and there are very specific points, and people say, no, you cannot understand it, it is so complicated and so deep between India and Pakistan. You have to learn the whole story of 47, the Brits and Gandhi and whatever. And you can also say, okay, you can learn it. Half a page is enough. And know that eventually we are all the same.
As there's no hand, maybe I add just a recommendation for a holiday which might show you the power of history after conflicts and maybe strengthening conflicts, because you mentioned North Macedonia. I just made a tour from Ljubljana to Thessaloniki, traveling around all those former Yugoslavian states. And if you go to Skopje, and I don't know if anybody has been in North Macedonia yet, but they can see how a state is invented with building history. So lots of 19th century building, National Theatre, National Archive, and so on, National Museum, with really big pictures, hundreds of oil-painted pictures. They're all brand new, but they pretend to have a long history. They even built a big Holocaust museum, much bigger than anyone in Germany there, to show that we are into the history and we help the Jews. So like in this small country, North Macedonia, you can have so, and then you travel to Srebrenica, to travel to Sarajevo, and you see how even sometimes concentration camp who are 100 meters away tell a completely different history. On the one side, the Serbs say 700,000 Serbs and were killed. On the other side, it's 70,000. And you have different stories 100 meters away, and then you can see what kind of frozen conflicts we do have here who are increasing again, especially if you go to Srebrenica, was a big museum financed by Turkey, to see the Muslim victims there. So this is just to add a recommendation following up your examples of North Macedonia. So this might be interesting 5 or 6 days travel.
Any final comments or questions before we conclude the day? Yes, Gerdi.
Since we have so many students here, let me ask a methodological question, especially given that I'm not a historian. In your presentation, you identified patterns, like if you sanction, it leads to this, or if you demonstrate, it leads to that. Can we do this if n is 5 or 10? I understood that history is to tell the story. And if you have a specific case, you can say in this particular case, because of a given context, a demonstration was successful or an economic sanction led to the intended change. But if even the definition of what counts as a demonstration or what counts as a sanction or what counts as a vain human being who wants to be invited, like what you said about Honecker, might mattered in a given time, but maybe not in the same, like if you apply Honecker's personality and compare it with Merkel, she is the least vain person that you could not possibly bribe with money or status or something. So given that all the contexts and all the different situations that can be summarized as demonstrations or sanctions or human motivation are so unique and so special and also so time sensitive in what period we are talking about, how can you draw a conclusion like the ones that you draw?
So, of course, history is not only telling stories. So that's what journalists maybe are doing, but even journalists do analyze. And of course, we analyze by researching. And political scientists are more likely to categorize and generalize from, like, what do they take? They take 20 cases. But of course, every case is special. I would agree to that. But we can see examples what happened. And of course, these examples are changing to different kind of meetings, changing to different kind of personalities, different kind of economic situations. But in general, I would still say that sanctions, protests, and other categories I mentioned, they do matter and they do focus. We have got many autocracies where people don't care that much about South Sudan or Sudan in general. It's like, it's sometimes in the media, but not. Although so many people are killed there, it has not the same attention as we draw, for example, to Israel. So today, nobody was speaking about Sudan, but we spoke quite often about Israel. So this is due to media attention and so on, not only to the number of kills, although the death toll is high there. But so this is one example for general points. And so to conclude, I would defend to have different kind of examples. So in my book, I've got about 20 countries and a sample of like this, and to draw some general conclusions if we want to learn something from history. And sometimes it's only one case, like the German case about the German Vergangenheitsbewältigung, dealing with the past, can be one example where we can learn something maybe for another country.
Apparently there were a few on Zoom who had raised their hand, my colleague said. So if somebody would like to ask a question from Zoom, I'm sorry to have blocked you out, I didn't realize. Please feel, let's take maybe one final question. Would somebody like to jump in from Zoom? And if so, please briefly introduce yourself. I would say just unmute your microphone and go ahead and pose your question if you have one. If not, then I do see a final hand here in the audience, so maybe I'll ask for the final question.
I might as Gergely from Bucharest. I have a question for Mr. Yossi Beilin. Your Excellency, after a lifetime spent in seeking dialogue between people in conflict, what have you discovered as the deepest common ground shared by human beings, regardless of their culture, religious, or political beliefs? Thank you.
Well, the common denominator is always, almost always, wider than you assume. When you sit together, you learn, first of all, that people want the same things: to work, to feed, to live, to educate, educate their children, and so on and so forth. I mean, these obvious things that everybody wants is a very good common denominator. If you are talking to somebody who wants his kids to be killed and to go to heaven and to marry 72 ladies, you can't have any negotiations, but you can have something maybe like a ceasefire for a short while. If you want to have really peace, real peace, you have to find the people on the other side who are pragmatic enough and understand that in order for them to live better, they have to give up on some of their demands, as you have to give up on some demands. My conclusion about negotiations, and we can talk for hours, is that eventually you find yourself negotiating on the red lines. People don't know this secret. They are coming with a list of demands and say, we need A, B, you have to disappear, you have to do that, you have to do that. And like now between United States and Iran, or Israel with Iran, that the proxies will not be supported by Iran, that they will not get the money, that they will end their nuclear activities, rather than to say, we need you, which is the case, to end your nuclear efforts. This is what we need. If you give a list, then the other side immediately may say, okay, I'm with you. I'll give you number 2, number 5, number 6, number 7. Okay? Only number 1 is something that I will keep for myself. But the number 1 that he's talking about, and which you presented, is not necessarily the most important thing for you. So don't give a laundry list to the other side, but concentrate on the important things for you and understand that eventually, at the end of the day, you will have to negotiate on the most important things for you, which in our case is, let us say, the Jerusalem or the refugees or things like that. We will not be able to say, okay, let us have another square meter in territory and compromise something on the other side. No, this is the secondary. These are the secondary things. So I believe that in most of the cases, when you speak to pragmatic people, there are solutions, and sometimes, and I will end by that, you find yourself in a crazy situation in which the relations between the negotiators, I call it the negotiator club. There is such a club. And we negotiate with our leaders. Let us compromise on this, let us accept this, rather than with each other, which is a very interesting development of negotiations. But during negotiations, when it takes hours and hours and hours, you find yourself in a situation whereby the other side is telling you, you know what? you want something from us. We can tell you the story or the secret. We can give up on it. But think twice before you demand it. Because if you really demand it, and if you get it, what may happen is ABC. And you say, well, I had not thought about it before. Give me some days, I want to think about it. And then you come back and say, okay, forget it. I mean, you see a situation in which the negotiators who want to succeed, which is not always the case. There are many cases in which the negotiators are coming to negotiate in order to lose. But if they want to succeed, their success is your success. And if you see your counterpart suggesting something which is a little bit foolish and against its own interest, you are telling the other side, be careful.
Thank you very much. We're actually a little bit over time, and I know some of you guys have tight agendas, so I do need to conclude it here, even though this is a discussion that could go on very, very long. Maybe over dinner we can have some of the conversations with the speakers. But first of all, I'd like to ask everybody to please join in expressing our sincere gratitude to all of the speakers and the partners for today's event.